Hello everyone, this is my video on animal behavior. This is chapter 51 in the AP Biology book. Behavior can be defined as anything an organism does and how it does it. So behaving, behavior, just animals in general, what do they do and how does it do it? So first of all, what scientists want to know is, before we get there, so just to show you where we're going, this unit is about ecology, and we're going to start off with the most basic unit of ecology. First you can see we're starting with organisms, the smallest unit. A whole bunch of organisms make a population. A whole bunch of populations make a community. A whole bunch of communities make an ecosystem. A bunch of ecosystems make a biome. And a whole bunch of biomes make the biosphere, or Earth. So this is a behavior. It's an organism, it's just one unit of biology or a unit of science, a living thing. So the big question that this presentation is about to answer is, why do organisms behave in particular ways? Why does an organism do what they do, and why do they do it? So here's this is a prezi. So this is it looks like a nice poster. So we're gonna go over this presentation. If it's very lengthy, obviously, since this is a video, you can pause it, come back to it. But I hope that most of you watch this and understand a little bit better what animal behavior is and what the different terms mean in this field. And some of you may plan on studying this in the future. So first of all, again, how is this happening and why is this happening is what we're trying to answer. So ethology is the study of behavior. You may have seen that in the previous video. And there's different types of explanations of why animals do the things that they do. One of the explanations is called proximate. A proximate explanation is how a behavior occurs. So that's the proximate explanation. And ultimately relates to why behavior is occurring. So behavior requires communication, particularly among animals who tend to have the most interesting behaviors. There's different forms of communication. So for there to be behavior, things have to communicate. And how things communicate, or how animals communicate, there's many forms. We're going to go over that really quick. The basic form of communication, they call it a signal. It has to be transmitted and received. So I'm going to go over a couple of signals, one called chemical and one called symbolic. In a chemical signal, substances in the environment or pheromones produced by other organisms can serve as chemical signals. So some of you may have heard of pheromones before. So they say that what tracks even in humans, what attracts animals or mammals to each other is actually something that is released from us called pheromones. And I can share a study with you about that. So, for example, here's an experiment. A couple of fish called minnows, and they're in a tank, and they introduce a chemical on the skin of a predatory fish. So, a chemical that's on the fish that hunts minnows. They insert it into the tank, and all the fish all of a sudden are over here. So that's sort of proof that there are such things as chemical signals. So here's an example of pheromones in ants. I'm not going to play it here in the presentation, but it's also going to be attached to this video assignment. The other type of signals are called symbolic. So instead of a chemical being released and transmitted and received, there's also symbolism. And so you're saying, what's a symbolic signal? The best example is honeybees. So honeybees, when they find new sources for nectar, they need to tell all the other bees, like, hey, there's food over there. But they don't really talk. They don't really have these pheromones to tell them. So what do? They do something called a waggle dance. Okay, and a waggle dance, what they do, I'm gonna play the video for you later, but it's called this video is called swaggle. So some of you may say like swagga, but it's more like swaggle. And they basically move in different directions, and the way that they move tells the other bees where exactly the new food source is located. So now that you know the communication, here are the two kinds of behaviors. So just to repeat, behavior is how an animal does something. It occurs because of communication. And now here are the two kinds of behaviors. First one's called innate. Innate are entirely under genetic control. So there's some things that we do that we can't explain, but it's in our code, it's in our genetics. So simple innate behaviors, one is called fixed action patterns. Fixed action patterns are highly stereotypical behaviors that are triggered by a sign stimulus and that are completed once initiated. So somebody's saying, what's a sign stimulus? So for example, like I've been doing all these pictures, this is a fish called the male, or this is a male, but it's a 3-spined stickleback. Okay, it's initiated, or its aggression is triggered when it meets or sees something with a red underside. So whether it's this or this or this or this, that makes the stickleback flare up and get angry. So question is, why would it do that? So the proximate explanation and ultimate explanations, this is something that I just want you to think about. But in terms of why or the ultimate explanations, let me just explain this one, and then maybe as we go through this presentation, you can think for yourself, what are the proximate and ultimate explanations? So maybe the ultimate explanation can be that maybe in the past they had a predator, evolutionary wise, and these hunted those sticklebacks. So that's why it triggers these red underbellies. Or another reason why is maybe if they're competing for the same female, these red bottoms remind them of another male stickleback. So anything red makes them angry and jealous. So those are some ultimate explanations we could think of for these sticklebacks. So here's another video. Again, I won't play it for you. It'll be attached below. But some of you may have heard of betta fish. They're cheap. You see them at Target or at pet stores. They also get super jealous. If you stick a mirror in front of them, they can flare up and get angry, even though it's just themselves. They think it's another competing male. So that's simple, just the red underbelly. But there's also complex innate behavior. So while there is a limit on the amount of behavioral complexity that can be genetically programmed, so there's only so much things that you can do that's programmed, there are many examples of complex innate behaviors. So here's a bug called Drosophila, and it involves several distinct and complex behaviors. So when they are courting each other, like a male and a female, first of all, they orient each other like so, and then they tap, which means like, hey, I'm interested, and then they do this little buzzing thing, kind of like singing. This is like a real complex mating ritual. And why it's complex and why it's genetic or innate is because nobody teaches them how to do this. Like, it's kind of coded that this is the 3 steps you need to do to get at that girl. They have to be in the right position, then they tap, and then they sing to each other. The question again, I pose to you. I'm not going to just tell you the answers, but you have to figure out, just in anything, what's the proximate and ultimate explanations. So I know it says graphic sexual content. Again, another video I'll post below. But this is just a video that shows how these two bugs or these insects, how they how they court each other for mating. If it's not innate behavior, it's called learned behavior. And this requires experience. So there's some behavior that you don't pick up. We're animals as well. But after a while, after experience, then you kind of do the exact same thing. It just isn't coded in our genes. So we're going to go over 5 types of them. So here are the 5. You can see 5 little pictures. I'm going to go through all 5 of learning. The first type of learning is called imprinting. You may have heard this in the video earlier. Imprinting is young animals. They go through a critical period where after they follow the organisms present during the period. So imprinting is very cool. Again, you'll see a video. There's a critical period where young animals kind of copy everything that you do. It actually is true for babies as well. So for example, this is a very famous experiment. His name is Konrad Lorenz. And what he did is, well, I'll show you the video later. But basically, he had these geese, and when they were young, they followed him everything and did everything that he did. So here's a picture I could show you real quick of Konrad Lorenz. So here he is, and all these geese just kept following him because when they were young, they just did whatever they kind of thought he was the mom, and everywhere he went, the geese went. The same thing can be true with young cranes and these low-flying aircraft. The cranes just follow them, and the same thing with in regular animals, the Lorenz and the pilots and the cranes. Those are sort of the exceptions to the rule, but in real life, that's what's supposed to happen. So, moving on. So that's imprinting. That's type number 1. Type number 2 is called spatial. So what happens is that the establishment of memories that reflect the physical structure of the environment. So they kind of think of space like spatial. They say that you have this memory based on the physical structure of how things are. You kind of remember what to do. So here's another experiment. It's these digger wasps, and basically how the pine cones are arranged, they just assume there's a nest in the middle. So maybe growing up, these digger wasps, their parents, they always made a nest in between a circle. So what happens, because of the spatial memory, anytime they see pine cones that are in a circle, they just assume that that's where their nest is. And that's kind of a learned behavior. They just think and know anything that has a circle, that must be my home. So here's another video of a mouse. This is pretty cool. Again, you can watch the video later, but you can see how a mouse also has spatial education, or how it moves and behaves based on spatial memory. Third type of learning we're going to go over is cognition. So cognition is the most complex of learned behavior. It relies on multiple mental processes. So you studying animal behavior is cognitive, or it's cognition. So studying about studying is one of the highest levels of learning. So we're talking about awareness, recalling, reasoning, evaluation to accomplish your behavior. Okay. So think of it as like basic learning. So an experiment that demonstrates support for the hypothesis that honeybees can remember and distinguish same from different. So for example, here's a color maze. So they take this honeybee, it goes in, it sees blue as the first door, and then it assumes when it sees blue or yellow, because the first door is blue, it will go to the food that's in the blue door. So it's pretty cool that a bee can figure out which way to go based on the first color. They do the exact same maze with no food. Okay, they kind of train this bee to think whatever the first door is, that's where the food is. So they do the exact same thing, but instead of colors, they use patterns. So they use these horizontal lines, and when it goes in and goes into this chamber again, instead of going here, it goes towards where the first door matched the pattern. There's no food, but it's just trained to think that whatever the first door is, that's where it goes. That's called cognition. It just learns based on experiments how to behave later on in life. The next type of learning is called associative. Associative is connecting one environmental feature with another. So for example, here's a blue jay. A blue jay tries to eat a monarch butterfly, and then once it eats the monarch butterfly, this blue jay is like, oh, this is disgusting, and it just pukes, like, blah. And the blue jay now associates every time it sees a monarch butterfly, it knows that it's going to vomit. So from the future, it'll never eat another monarch butterfly again. That's called associative. It takes one environmental feature and connects it to another. So it knows that eating a monarch butterfly equals vomiting. So here's another, it's another interesting video. I'll attach it again below. It's called operant conditioning. I think you all will find this very interesting. And the last one we haven't talked about is social learning. And this is one thing that I tried to teach in our class, that part of learning actually is from other people. There's this theory that if a baby was in isolation, or if the baby had no connection to anybody, it would never learn anything. It would never learn how to talk or walk its whole life if it's just by itself in isolation. And no one has really tested it, because nobody wants to put a baby just outside and not interacting with anyone. But they say that most of our learning actually occurs because somebody or some people or any other animal teach it what to do. So for example, like a young chimpanzee, it learns how to crack nuts because its elders or parents or uncles, whatever, it cracks nuts. Its parents crack nuts, so then a little chimpanzee learns how to do it just by learning from the elder. So here's a funny commercial I think you all like. It says, Australian children seem really mean. And that sort of explains, talks about social learning. So those are the 5 types of learning that are learned. So hopefully this helps organize in your head the two types of behaviors, innate and learned, simple and complex innate, and then the 5 types of learned behavior, all requiring experience. So it's kind of unwise to think of these two things as completely separate. The question says why? Because nothing in life really is black and white. So some things are gray. So some things are genetic, but they also were learned. So for example, like us, we know that we need to eat food. So that's partly genetic, but also how we eat and what we eat, we kind of learn from other people as well. So like lots of things in life, it's kind of a combination, a hybrid of both innate and learned. Very rarely is something just innate or something is just learned. So the last thing we're going to talk about is behavior. When you learn about something, how animals behave, it's never fixed. It changes as well. So we're going to talk about 4 ways behavior evolves. The first one is behavior and genetics. What is the relationship between an organism's genetics and its behaviors? There's always a relationship, even if it is just for the ability to learn. So here's example number 1. Think of an insect. These are called green lacewings. And all of them are kind of morphologically identical. So they all kind of the same. But what we're going to do is we're going to hybridize them, which means I'm going to mix some different of these lacewings. I'm going to mate and combine some of them so they're kind of mixed. So the funny thing is that hybrid lacewings actually have songs that have combined characteristics of both parental species. So in this experiment, they take one parent, one lacewing, and this is its song. It looks like this. This is the sound wave. And they take another, a different type of green wing or lacewing, and this is their sound. And their baby, when they hybridize them, this is what their song sounds like. It doesn't look like the dad or doesn't look like the mom. It looks kind of like a merge of both of them. So for example, see the gap between these two sounds? That gap is the same. But these little units, they're more like the dad. So that tells me, or what we're trying to learn here, is that there is some sort of behavior that is genetic that's kind of a combination from the parents. And these are called, these are insect calls. Example number 2 is migration. So in this experiment, what they do is they take these black-capped birds that were, and they capture them in Britain, and they put them in Germany. So they put them in this little, like a cone, and the bird, because it can't get out, it scratches in this direction. Okay, like the bird just inherently just wants to go in this direction, like it wants to migrate, and they notice that it scratches the side of the cone right here. And what happens is that the birds from Britain demonstrate a migratory preference different from native German blackcaps. So native German ones, they scratch, or they want to go this way. Okay, but those that were born in Britain and that were from Britain, and they do the experiment with them, they notice that they want to scratch, go towards Britain. So they know, even though it's genetic, like they want to migrate, we've kind of changed up where they want to go based on where their original home is. So this one, they all scratch this way if they're originally from Britain, and normal German ones, they scratch this way. So that's just a way to teach you about genetics and how can it evolve. Number 2, it can also evolve because of the environment. What is the relationship between an organism's genetics and its environment? So we're talking about fitness. Somebody wondering what fitness means, or the definition of fitness does not mean like how buff you are. It means the definition of fitness is basically how well are you doing in the environment, and can you raise a lot of offspring. So if you're super fit, if you're an animal that's super fit, that means you're thriving in your environment, you get lots of food, and you can have lots of offspring and they can survive. So example number 1 is foraging. Foraging, if you may have heard the word foraging before, is like getting food. So natural selection, which we'll talk about later, should favor minimize energetic cost. So some of you may be saying, what does that mean? And then it says it should also favor maximize food acquisition, or optimal foraging theory. What that means is animals want to get as much food as they can in the laziest way possible. Okay, so you should favor minimize cost but maximize food. So for example, this is an example of a crow. This side is average number of drops, and this one is drop height. So crows demonstrate a food drop preference that is energetically optimized. So what they do when they drop is they pick a height where the food or whatever they use, the total flight height, is the least, but they get the most food. So for example, this one, they can get some food, but it requires a lot of energy to go this high. Same thing with 15 and stuff like that. What their preferred height is right here, right in the middle. Okay, so when I say like the environment affects you, the environment affects animals. To the food that they get, they want to go in the laziest way possible. Same thing with, this is Drosophila. We talked about this before. Drosophila raised in different population densities evolve different foraging path lengths. So for example, those that live in a high population density, so if we have a bug that's in a crowded area, they're more willing to go farther for their food because they're used to being so crowded and everybody wants the food. Those that live in a low population density, they're quote-unquote lazier. They don't go far to get their food because they're used to being in a low population. So that's another way in which the environment affects how they behave. Example 2 is also parental influence. So the environment, in terms of parents, the learned behaviors have to be taught. So here's an example of cross-fostering male mice. So if they cross a California mice that was fostered by a white-footed mice, the aggression towards the intruder is reduced, the aggression in a neutral situation is no difference, and the paternal behavior is reduced. But if I reversed it, if I took a white-footed mouse and it was raised by a California mouse, the aggression is no difference, the aggression is increased and the paternal behavior is different. So just because, depending on the parent, like who raises who, their aggression can change, which kind of is true for us humans as well. So depending on who your parents are, like if they're naturally aggressive or if they have a short temper, sometimes their kids tend to have a short temper as well. So again, mice that are cross-fostered by other species, like from a different species, can be more aggressive than normal. Number 3, behavior and fitness. So we talked about fitness, okay? So fitness, how animals behave, it's funny because you think people behave because they want to do stuff for themselves. But in real life, how they really behave is because they want reproductive success. Not that they want females or males. What they want is to have the most babies so that their species lives on. So mating systems, for example, there are some things called monogamous species, there are polygamous species, and there are polyandrous species. So monogamous, you should know, is just like a male and a female, and they only mate with each other. Polygamous, you could have one male and multiple females. And polyandrous, you could just do different types of species mating as well. The mating system has an effect on sexual dimorphism in a species. So parental care, for example, how they behave is because they want to protect their kids, their babies. So if you saw Finding Nemo, just for example, Marlin and Nemo, he has the strong attraction to take care of him. In real life, even though they don't have any feelings, they don't talk, they have this strong connection. They need to protect their young. And then sexual selection, so male preference can also drive the evolution of mate preference, can drive the evolution of male behavior. So depending on what the females want, the males will change how they behave. So for example, this is kind of a cool experiment. So here's a bird, zebra finch. Do you see how both of the parents are ornamented? They have this little top part right here. And when they have offspring, the female that was raised by parents who have ornaments, she only will date or go out, quote unquote, go out with other birds that have that ornament. Same thing if they have just one of the parents has one, and the male is ornamented, then the mate preference is going to be ornamented. Here, the female is ornamented, and they don't have any preference if it's ornamented or not. Same thing if both the parents don't have an ornament. They don't have any. So long story short, when we talk about mating preference, a female, or a quote-unquote daughter, she'll only date a male that has an ornament if its parents or its dad had an ornament. And the reverse, if they don't have an ornament, like the female doesn't have parents that have ornaments, then the bird's like, I could date anybody. But it's pretty cool. It's an interesting experiment. Here's another, I love this experiment. People will say it's true for humans as well. So check this out. This is called mate choice copying. So female guppies actually prefer more orange males. So in general, this is a control sample. If this female had a choice between these 3 eligible bachelors, it'll choose naturally the one with more orange. It's like, oh, I like this one. It has more orange. That's the one I'm going to go out with and date. But if the one with less orange has, like, let's just say a wife, then females like that one better. Isn't that crazy? So basically, a female will always go for the more orange unless a fish with less orange is in a relationship. So like this girl will only go out with this guy if this guy's in a relationship. It's kind of funny. It's kind of like true in humans as well. Like girls, for some reason, or even guys, they're attracted to things that they can't have. So if someone's in a relationship, or they know that they're taken, or they can't be, they're unattainable, then all of a sudden they're more attractive in their eyes. So female guppies prefer more orange males unless a less orange male is in courtship with a female, in which case female guppies prefer that male. So it's like, all right, you're ugly, but if you have a girl or you're taken, then I kind of want you now. And then male competition. So for mates, there are different ways in which animals behave because they want the female. So in lots of other species, males fight for female attention. This is called agonistic behavior. Here's a video. You can watch it again on your own. It's called Agonism in Elephant Seals. So you can see how elephant seals, it's kind of funny to see them fight, how they fight for the attention or for a female. And then the last thing, game theory applications. Game theory is a field of behavioral economics which evaluates the advantages of different strategies. So again, how do animals behave and how does it evolve? So say for example these side blotched lizards. One is orange, orange throats. One's called blue throat and one's called yellow throat. So orange is the most aggressive, blue the least aggressive, and the yellow is non-territorial and it's like sneaky. This is kind of a game where the orange is way better than the blue. So if they're in together, the orange always wins. If the blue and the blue always wins. But if the yellow and the orange are together, the yellow actually beats orange because it's non-territorial, it's sneaky. So this is just like a environmental game of rock, paper, scissors. So some animals behave in this way just because it's the way that they're most advantageous to living. Oh, this is the last one, sorry. Altruism. So I don't know if you've heard of altruism before, but it's a behavior in which it increases the fitness of other organisms while decreasing its own fitness. So think of altruism as being like the nice guy or being the nice girl, like they're helping others. And the question is, why would an animal help others? How can this be explained? Like, why would an animal help another animal? People understand humans because we have brains and we understand each other. And like, I want to feed someone that's hungry, or there's a homeless person that needs money and I'll give them money. That makes sense because I care. But why would other animals help other animals? Like, what's the point? So think for example, vervet monkeys. They have this call, and if there's a predator around, they make this noise, and it tells them there's a predator around. So for example, like this, I believe this is like some sort of snake. It tells all the other monkeys that, hey, there's a predator around. How can it be explained? They say it can be explained by relatedness. So the reason why people are altruistic or animals are altruistic is because they're kind of closely related, and by doing so, they kind of protect themselves. So, inclusive fitness is anything that increases proliferation of an organism's genes, not necessarily by the organism. So animals are still kind of selfish. The only reason why they'd help other animals is because it helps them raise more kids. Remember, fitness is they want more sexual, they want more reproductive possibility. So, for example, here's a famous quote: "I would lay down my life for 2 siblings or 8 cousins," because again, your genes are more likely to be spread this way. Another example, female ground squirrels, they live closer to their birthplace. And the reason why they live closer to their birthplace, so here's the female, like how far they live from their home versus the males, is because they could tell other female ground squirrels, like, oh, things are happening or there's danger. They kind of stick together and live closer, so they could kind of warn each other. And of course, females are important because they're the one that make the offspring, so that's why they stay kind of close. And another altruistic thing, I know it looks kind of disgusting. These are naked mole rats. And what they do is they sacrifice their lives, if there's a predator, to preserve the life of the queen. So in this animal species, the queen is the one that, you know, gives birth to all the young. And these mole rats, like whether they're siblings or cousins, they'll kill themselves. They'll risk their lives so that the queen is saved. And the reason why is because they could have more kids or cousins, siblings, whatever, if the queen still lives. So that is, I know it's a long video, but that is animal behavior. Hope you understand it a little bit better. I'll give you a copy of this prezi as well, and hopefully you're following along with the notes. I'd suggest you watch the videos that follow so you could understand animal behavior. I think you'll enjoy the videos to help you better understand the material. So thank you for watching, and I'll see y'all later.